You know that feeling when you scroll through endless listings of professional video switchers, each one flashing glossy photos of sleek panels and promises of seamless live production, only to get the unit home and realize the workflow feels clunky, the inputs don't play nice, or the device just takes up more rack space than you have. I've been there, and it's the kind of buyer hesitation that makes me pause before I click Add to Cart. That's why I wanted to break down the Roland Professional V80 HD in a way that actually reflects what the device does in a real-world setup, not just what the spec sheet says. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the V80 HD sits in a niche that's getting crowded, 8-channel switchers that promise to handle everything from in-person conferences to web-streamed webinars and small studio productions. What makes this model stand out is how it squeezes a lot of connectivity into a footprint that's small enough to slide into a 2U rack slot. You get 4 3G SDI inputs that can accept 1080p or 4K sources, and 4 HDMI inputs, 2 of which are true 4K ports with built-in downscalers. On the output side you have SDI, HDMI, a USB-C streaming port, and a LAN port that supports RTMP and SRT. For anyone who's tried to cobble together a live streaming rig with a mix of SDI cameras, a laptop, and a projector, the sheer variety of inputs and outputs can feel like a lifesaver. So who should actually consider buying this thing? If you run a small church that needs to switch between a camcorder, a DSLR, and a laptop presentation feed, while also streaming to YouTube via a single laptop, the V80 HD is tailor-made. It lets you route the SDI feed from a camcorder straight to the House Worship projector, then flip to an HDMI laptop feed for a sermon slide deck, all without needing an external scaler. The USB-C streaming output can be plugged directly into OBS or Wirecast, turning the switcher itself into a capture card, no need for a separate capture device. That same workflow works for a conference room where the speaker uses a 4K cam for close-ups, a secondary 1080p cam for wide shots, and a laptop for a PowerPoint deck. You can downscale the 4K cam on the fly, keep the picture crisp, and push a single 1080p stream to the corporate internet via SRT. If you're a solo YouTuber or a podcaster who only needs a couple of HDMI sources, you might find the V80 HD a bit overkill. The price point sits above entry-level mixers, and you won't get built-in graphics, multi-view, or advanced keying that you'd find on a higher-end broadcast switcher. For a creator whose workflow is camera laptop stream, a smaller HDMI-only switcher or even a software-based solution could be more cost-effective. The V80 HD shines when you actually need to juggle multiple formats and you want the flexibility to future-proof your rig. Now let's talk about the practical strengths that matter day-to-day. The first thing I noticed when I set the unit up for a local charity fundraiser was how quickly I could map each input to a corresponding output. The front panel has clearly labeled buttons for each of the 8 sources, and a small LCD shows you which channel is live. Switching between a 4K cam feeding the main hall screen and an HDMI laptop for a live donation ticker took less than a second. Because the unit handles frame rate conversion internally, I didn't have to worry about mismatched 30 frames per second and 60 frames per second sources. The V80 HD just did the work quietly in the background. Another real-world win is the USB-C streaming port. I connected it to a modest-spec Windows laptop running OBS, and the switcher appeared as a single high-quality video source. No driver installations, no lag, and the stream stayed at a steady 60 frames per second even when I was bouncing between 4K and 1080p inputs. For anyone who's tried to capture an SDI feed with a capture card, they'll appreciate that the V80 HD takes care of the conversion and presents a clean HDMI-compatible stream. The LAN port adds a nice safety net. If your USB-C path gets clogged by other USB devices, you can fall back to a direct RTMP push to your streaming platform, which is handy for venues that already have a wired network but limited USB ports. On the downside, the V80 HD isn't a full-blown broadcast solution. It lacks an internal multi-view monitor, so you can't see all 8 sources on a single screen without an external monitor or a separate multi-viewer. That means if you're running a fast-paced event with multiple camera angles, You'll need an extra piece of gear to keep an eye on everything. Audio mixing is also very minimal. The unit only passes through embedded audio from HDMI or SDI sources, and there's no built-in EQ or compressor. For productions that rely heavily on live sound mixing, you'll have to route your audio through a separate mixer or a DAW, which adds another layer of complexity. Another subtle trade-off is the scaling flexibility. While the V80 HD can downscale 4K to 1080p, it doesn't upscale 1080p to 4K, nor does